This is rad. This is rad. This is also rad. If you're like me, then you've probably been at work doom-scrolling Instagram, and after enough attempts to politically radicalize you, it'll finally show you a cool video like this. Then you'll think to yourself, man, someone's having way more fun than me. And then Simple Plan plays in the back of your head. I'm just a kid. But what are these? And why are they so cool? Well, to start off, these are what the Thai people called Rua Hanjao, or Longtail boats. But to find out why they're so cool, we have to go back to 1932. A man named Sanong Thittaburo. Real quick, a lot of these names and words are going to be in Thai, and I don't know any Thai except for like Sawati Krup and Krup Krup, and none of those show up, so I'm just going to do my best, and hopefully it's good enough. Sanong Thittaburo was the helmsman for the royal family. Basically just means he rowed the boats. And that sounds like an exhausting enough job for the king and his wife. But depending on how long he's been there, the king's father had 146 consorts and 55 children that made it to adulthood. And if necessity is the mother of invention, what Thittaburo needed was a brake. And that brake came in the form of a small car engine, a long shaft, and a little two-blade propeller. Keeping it simple, he directly coupled the drive shaft to the engine's output shaft, then threw that all on the back of his boat and created the first of what we now call the Longtail boat. But it turns out that if he wanted to break, Thittaburo could have also just waited a little longer. Because later that same year, there's a bloodless coup that ended the reign of the royal family in Thailand, which might have also contributed to the fact that this boat was then reinvented 4 different times. First in 1933 by a man named Sachip Ratsarn, then in 1939 by a man named Chanchai Ferretkun, then in 1941 by Sukum Chirawanit, and then finally in 1950 by Samai Kitakun. All 5 of these people came up with the ideas independently and are all considered the inventor by the Research Council of Thailand. However, just because it was invented doesn't mean it caught on immediately. That can be attributed to a man by the name of Songsak Sripraserting. Fortuitously born the same year as the boat, Songsak was from the Chinese island of Hainan, where he lived with his mother for 9 years until 1941 when Japan invaded. During the escape, Songsak remembered turning down an alleyway and coming face to face with the business end of a pistol. On the other end of the pistol was a Japanese soldier on horseback. They locked eyes for what must have seemed like an eternity, before the Japanese soldier finally just waved them through. From there, they boarded a refugee boat and sailed 1,500 miles to their new home in Bangkok, Thailand. Shortly after they arrived in Bangkok, Songsek's mother gave birth to his little brother Chanchai. By now, Songsek was 10 years old and wanted to go to school so he could learn to read and write the Thai language. But his mom had to work, so he was left having to take care of his little brother. To solve this, he would carry his little brother to the local school and sit on a mound of dirt outside the classroom. From that mound, he could see and hear the teacher, and he would follow along with what she wrote on the board by scribbling in the dirt. I can only assume that the teacher saw him and figured out what was going on, but just let him keep going. Through this, Songsak became proficient enough in the Thai language that at 15 he got a job as an apprentice at a machine shop. Continuing this trend of tenacity, he soaked up everything he could from the old machinist there, and by the age of 19, he knew enough to open his own shop. At this time, most of the boats in Thailand were either government boats or big slow tugboats. Big slow tugboats with apparently very bad transmissions. And these bad transmissions are what would feed most of Songsek's business for the first couple of years. He worked on so many of these transmissions, he began building his own version that didn't have the same problems. Word spread about how good he was, and his shop built a steady stream of clientele. In 1958, he married his wife Pornpiman, and they had their first son, Wiwat. About the same time, he saw what was essentially a longtail boat, but it used a U-joint instead of tilting the engine, and had an exposed shaft that chewed out the back of the boat. He also saw a small German-made sailboat auxiliary motor, and had the idea to do the Super Saiyan dance and fusion the two.
Fusion! Ha!
Whoa, it worked!
This part of the story I'm a little hazy on, because it seems like back in 1932, Thittaburo did the same thing and had just a direct drive with no U-joint or anything. But according to Songsak, the common use at the time was to have a U-joint, so maybe it just had become common or something like that, so I just left it in there, but it could be a little bit inaccurate. This is like a third person telling of Songsek's story. Anyway, what he came up with is what we would recognize as the longtail boat. It had a simple enclosed coupler that could be attached to a variety of engines and kept the shaft from chewing up the back of the boat. It also was easily replaced. As luck would have it, small JLO and Rotax two-stroke motors started becoming more available in Thailand at this time. With these cheap little engines and Sungsek's coupler, shaft, and propeller, the everyman could have a small powerized boat that they could do their daily business with. This was revolutionary, and business took off for Sungsek, and he decided his business needed a new name. What he decided on was he thought Three Kings was a really good hand to have when you played cards. So he named it after what you would see on the letters if you had three kings in your hand. Just the 3 Ks. Not the words 3 Ks, like just 3 in a row. Equipped with this unfortunate business name, him and his wife began delivering kits by the Jeep load. They said at times the Jeep would be so loaded that the front end would become light and they wouldn't be able to steer. If you tried to load a modern Jeep with so much weight that it can't steer, it would probably, well, you might fix the speed wobble, but it would probably snap in half. Being the consummate older brother that he was, as soon as he was old enough, he brought on his little brother Chanchai to help run the business, and they ran the 3Ks company for 50 years together. Today, Longtail boats in Thailand are used for everything from fishing to tourism to mail delivery to religious ceremonies, and of course, the thing I had clickbait clips of at the beginning of this video, racing. The racing mostly appears to be drag racing, just two boats ripping down the river as fast as they can, see who gets there first. As best as I can tell, they'll seem to be set up in classes where you have those small, like single person boats, and then you'll have like a bigger 2 or 3 person boat, and then an even bigger one that would almost look like the ones that they use for tourism. And then within those size classes, they'll also have like engine classes. One of the most common being the 150cc, which is using like a small hedge trimmer engine or something. These smaller boats are the ones that are likely to be using the kind of kit that Sungsek sold. In any case, for all these boats, only the engine, shaft, and propeller are purchased. The boat itself will either be a repurposed rowboat or they'll make their own boat. According to one source, the smaller boats will have one of 3 different holes. Either one with a step with high sides, a flat bottom with no sides, or a third one that's in the middle. Once again, according to the source, the names for these, the stepped one is Rua Sonsorn, meaning 2 parts, as in the step in it in the bottom of the hole was like 2 different parts. For the flat bottom one, it was Rua Krado, meaning jump, like I assume because it's kind of shaped like a jump if you flipped it over, or because it just jumps as it goes across the water. I'm not really sure. And the third one that's a mix between the two is Rua Kratui. And Kratui is the Thai word for another thing that's a mix between 2 things that Thailand is famous for. Well, the second 2 will almost certainly have one of those little 150cc engines. I've seen some pictures of that first one with a Rotax 2-stroke or even a car engine. Then as the boats get bigger, the engines get bigger, and everything gets faster. While a large amount of the engines will be a 1.6 liter Toyota engine, it's not uncommon to see a diesel or basically anything they can get their hands on. As cool as those are, it gets cooler. Because just like when Rotax motors first became available and it revolutionized things for them, turbos have become available. And they are cooking. It's said that these turbo boats are capable of over 100 miles an hour, which that's on the water. And if you notice, nobody's wearing any gear. They should have like helmets, and they're not even wearing life vests. They're just the clothes on their back and ripping. And these competitions aren't worth that much money. They're just basically whoever wins gets the money for like gas. And that's it. And maybe if you like had a sponsorship on your boat from the shop that built it, you could like drum up like business for your shop. But that's it. They're just out there doing this for fun. And it's awesome. Every time I see one of these, I always think, why haven't I built something like this? Why don't I have a go-kart with a motorcycle engine? Or like a snow bike or a sand rail? Why am I so boring? These things rip. I could watch them all day. And it's largely thanks to a refugee who escaped an invasion and wouldn't stop until he could provide for his family. And then he continued to not stop. In his 70s, Sungsek had a stroke, and by 2008, he had lost control of his original company. Not one to be denied, he started a whole new company with his wife called SPS, which stands for Sungsek and Pornpimin Sri Prasertying, which is less creative than the original, but far less unfortunate, so we'll take it. And while his business might have struggled at first, as soon as people realized it was Sungsek's company, it got a real good foothold, and it still exists today, being run by his son as a rival against his original company. Unfortunately, Sungsek passed away in 2014. His funeral lasted 7 days and was attended by 800 people. I don't know if that's common in Thailand, but I imagine it's not. But it makes sense for a man like Sungsek. Before his proliferation of the Longtail, small businesses and farmers would have to row all of their goods around or pay a hefty fee for a ride from one of those tugboats. There wasn't a lot of mobility. He brought mobility to large portions of Thailand. I had originally started making this video, I wanted just to talk about boats with turbos that go fast and were basically just duct taped together and ripping. But honestly, even if you look at the boats, the engines are clean. They take a lot of pride in these things. And it's a lot and thanks to Sungsek. So I thought that'd be a fun story to tell. And I hope I did it justice. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.